particularly punchy this morning, apparently, so.
Good.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Maybe good. I don't know. I wanted to give Patrick a chance to respond, but I don't think those are mutually exclusive. Escapism and also having something meaningful.
I do in the way that usually the conversation goes with people I've talked to, because usually the conversation around escapism has to do with I am dissatisfied with something in my normal life, so I'm going to run away from it by going to this other thing that I like, and they're considered separate. Whereas I don't think that they have to be separate. I wanted him to get a chance to respond to, but I was more thinking in terms of like exploration rather than escapism, where if you're playing a fantasy game and you're exploring something, that's different than trying to run away from your current problems. It's kind of like when you take a shower and you have like sudden insights into something going on. I think that there's plenty of times that TTRPGs set the conditions to be able to allow you to have insights and moments of personal growth without necessarily looking for them. But it doesn't have to be dissatisfaction with your current situation to get there.
Okay. Yeah, I see that angle. I do think that it's a little bit of a semantics argument, because when people are saying escapism, they're not. I know you just explained that that's what you're hearing, but I don't think that you do need that level of dissatisfaction to get to that point. Like, I just enjoy playing games, and also while doing so, I'm escaping real life because I'm immersed in this whole different world. So and I think that that's probably more the direction that they're trying to use it when they're talking about escapism and fantasy and that sort of thing. But I also haven't seen specifically those examples that might be triggering that instinct. It is an interesting philosophical topic, though, because depending on how you look at things, it could be one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think just to like respond to that, like these specific examples are more like, I know the Wizards of the Coast design team sometimes tackles deep-rooted issues not very deeply. So a really good example is in the Monster Manual. We're recording, so this might segue. In the Monster Manual, they were really proud of the fact that they had male and female depictions of all these different monsters. And I am not opposed to that, to be clear. And, the first time I kind of came across this, because as a dude, I didn't really think too much about it, but I was reading the RPG therapy book, and one of the things that she wrote was just be aware of the fact that of all of the monsters in the Monster Manual, like, there are way more female-specific monsters than male-specific monsters. So hags, succubi, medusas, this kind of thing, and that because of that, there may be some sort of negative effect, like negative cultural effect. And I hadn't really thought about it. So I asked the women in my life that play TTRPGs, and they're like, yeah, mythology tends to be sexist. And I'm like, never thought about that. So Wizards of the Coast is like, hey, by the way, we have all these men monsters now, so it's not sexist anymore. And I brought that to the female players, and they just rolled their eyes, because it's right. That is a deeper rooted problem than just, now we need male Medusas. Like it's not nothing. And like, it's like that meme of the guy who's like biting the metal and he's in like 26th place. Like, they did the minimum amount of effort, and they're like, yeah, we did it. We fixed sexism in D&D. And that's the kind of thing where I'm like, you're over celebrating for minimum effort. So like that's more what I'm speaking to, I guess.
Yeah, there's a weird there's this weird thing where we're trying to do right by people. The idea of having equal representation for these sorts of past grievances, basically like trying to course correct, right, and even the scales, it gets caught up in the marketing, in the just the being a check mark on a list. And I think that's why if you like zoom it out and say that there's like a cultural divide that occurs within our country, it's because of these, when you look at the Democrats trying to push, this isn't going to the podcast probably, when you look at Democrats like trying to push an agenda toward inclusion and equal opportunity and that sort of thing, like those are all righteous, important, useful aspects, and we should totally move past the burdens that we've kind of placed on our society, and just all the failures, and move beyond into a place that's better. But it doesn't feel like, a lot of it feels like they're checking a box instead of having like deep, heartfelt connection. And I think that's always been like a Democratic problem, is that they speak on things, but they don't like usher in like a wealth of emotion when they do it. It just feels very mechanical.
So just on that topic, though, this is like a very specific example. It connects to the Wizards of the Coast thing. So I don't know if you remember, but there was some thing where they ended with a men and a women because they wanted to be inclusive. And it's like, if you look at this is an etymology thing. Amen has nothing to do with men. Like, it's like the Latin has nothing to do with the male part of the gender spectrum. So the one that made me laugh with Wizards of the Coast is like, we have male banshees, but if you look up what the word banshee means, it means woman of the fairies. And so it's like, well, now men have encroached on the women of the fairies. So I'm okay with loud ghosts that are men and women, but to call the men ghost a woman of the fairies, that's the kind of thing where, to me, again, that is a shallow solution to something that could be deeply looked at. And again, you don't want to do too much because somebody else is going to get mad. So I don't envy the position that they're in. Again, the thing that just kind of like rubs me the wrong way is the over celebration, which is probably a marketing thing. It's a corporate thing. It's the over celebration of minimal effort. So.
Oh yeah, that's probably a good tagline. Man, no, it's pervasive, for sure. We'll get to our actual topic probably, but part of me wants to keep this in just because it's, more amusing. But so Dragon Age Veilguard, you play any of the Dragon Age games previously?
Are they also made by Larian?
No.
That's not Dragon Age. That's Divinity Original Sin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have not played either of those, but I was just trying to keep the trail.
Okay. Yeah. So the Dragon Age games have a very storied history of being dark, like dark fantasy, basically. In Dragon Age Origins, you make some really rough decisions, and there's a lot of slavery, and there's a lot of like injustice, and like that's the point. And the writing is like, it reflects that a lot as well, and it's moved. I think it was, honestly, Dragon Age Inquisition is the one that I've played most. I've beaten it like 3 or 4 times at this point, and it's very well written. And even then, like, some people were complaining that it's gotten a little bit away from its roots. I don't know that that's the case, but Dragon Age Veilguard totally has, where the writing is super shallow, and the reason that it's super shallow is not because these people are bad writers. It's because they have to write for an audience that isn't willing to entertain the deep tragedy that they would need to experience in this game. They're pandering. I don't want to call it pandering, because they've made like genuine efforts to try to be progressive and develop the game for a modern audience, but they've missed the mark on doing that, because a part of what makes Dragon Age is that you have to confront these awful, horrendous, topics and and make a choice. Sometimes those choices aren't great, lesser of two evils. And that's like the whole basis for much of the Dragon Age series. So they totally got away from that. And that's why, I mean, EA, I don't know EA like announced their quarterly reports, and it's just underperforming. Like they garnered 50% of the revenue that they thought the game was going to get, which 50% is awful by any sort of standard. And even like some of the language that they're using is like the Dragon Age Veilguard game. They always try to talk it up. And anytime that I've dealt with like board of directors and just like suits in general, is you're telling them a story to make them feel good about themselves. And so the language that they used was like Dragon Age engaged this many millions of players. Engaged, not sold the game to, not like has consistently playing or anything like that. And there was like a free like demo that a lot of people had access to. So like as far as engaged goes, like what does that mean? Through social media, through signups on a website, like how much are they actually using to like buffer that number? And it just all comes down to the marketing side of it. And I just feel like some of those similar threads in pushing for a more progressive agenda, I guess, it's too much of checking boxes and not enough of understanding the true needs of the communities that underlie these titles.
Yeah, that is a perfect encapsulation of, I think, the point I was trying to get across, which is this all came about because I listened to Josh Johnson's latest set on YouTube. It's like an hour-long set about the Super Bowl halftime show. And he had this quote that I think is brilliant, which is, art can save you and entertainment will never be your salvation. And really one of the things he was pointing to is the fact that Kendrick Lamar definitely, like, he positively energized the Black community. And some people were upset that he didn't go far enough and that he wasn't reckless enough, or that he didn't just come out and say some of the things he wanted. And Josh's point was just, he's a rapper. He's not a cultural revolutionary. He's not trying to overthrow the government. He's an entertainer. And while entertainment can get you to think, most people who are revolutionaries have written books, and that this is his words, that the government is so confident you won't read any of those books that they keep them for free in the library. And so the idea is that there's entertainment, right, which is meant as a distraction, but then there's art, which really gets you to think meaningfully and deeply. And what it really instantly triggered is a lot of conversations I've had with some people over TTRPGs, and the conversations speak of them more as entertainment rather than art. And I've personally experienced times at the table where players have come out as gay or trans at the table because the story gave them an environment that allowed them to feel safe, that allowed them to grow as a real world person and change their lives. So to me, that's not entertainment. It might be escapism, but they're escaping the confines that they felt they had until they grew in emotional strength through playing TTRPGs to be able to come out and be their authentic selves. And to me, to say like, the only value is entertainment and these are dollars and hey, we have men and women banshees. Like, to me, it like distracts from the true value of it that I've personally experienced and seen, and also heard other people talk about. And also, we're never going to get that from Dungeons and Dragons because it's owned by Hasbro. It's the big check the box thing. I don't hold it against Wizards of the Coast. I just don't want the conversation to stop at checking the box, which is why, as much as I'm not happy about D&D, although like the new rules are amazing. Like I can get into that, but like the smaller systems like Distal is a great example of that. That game is art. It's a personal project built on passion, not based on pandering, to use a reductive term. It's it's the smaller creators that are going to deliver the most meaningful targeted experiences, and that can maintain the most artistic integrity because they don't have to tell a story that's not true. They don't have to tell a veiled story to suits or anything like that. And it's more that's really what got me all punchy this morning. And it is a semantics argument, and I think semantics matter. So I don't know. That's just me.
No, I get you. And actually, I feel like I want this to be the topic of the video. You just want to keep riffing on the... Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's fine.
Originally, we were going to talk about monsters and the monster manual and just how Distal does monsters and blah, 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 blah. But none of that matters because this is way more entertaining. So, but to your point, so you're talking about how art and entertainment are different and how people have had experiences that have kind of like brought them out of their shell by virtue of playing TTRPGs. But what I would like to ask you is like, how much of that is actually TTRPGs, and how much of it is the community that surrounds the table, basically? Like it seems like a vessel, maybe, but that vessel can be entertainment because ultimately it's it's everything that surrounds it that gave them that chance.
Yeah, I think it's a Venn diagram. Like, I just think that there's like entertainment and art aren't necessarily separate. There have been plenty, actually, a real good example that makes a lot of people's eyes roll. I love The Big Bang Theory. A lot of people are like, this is a shallow comfort show that only, dull-witted soccer moms keep on in the background while they're drinking from their boxed wine container. And I don't care. Sheldon Cooper's emotional growth through the show, having had friends just like him, hits a certain chord with me, and I like it. But where was I going with that? It was TTRPGs and how much of that. And I think it's the same thing where it's the Venn diagram. I think you can absolutely play TTRPGs as pure entertainment, and I think even having things like in the Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide, just like guidance and advice of being like, hey, if you think about this while you're playing the game, you might get this kind of outcome. I think that the rules can create conditions where things like that become possible. So, for example, Distal, I could see Distal as an excellent way of just understanding loss and randomness. I've played solo D&D before, and the times that hit me most emotionally were like an NPC I really cared about just got one-shotted and is gone. Not everyone is ready for that, but that game offers possibilities that Dungeons and Dragons doesn't because of its death mark system, because of the overall tone and the life path system that you develop at character creation. And D&D, I think, is a little sneaky because it is so broad and it is so like non-specific that it can begin as a light social thing that eventually becomes more meaningful over time. So I don't want this to come off as I'm bashing D&D. It's more just understanding the tools and what comes out of using specific tools, I guess.
Yeah, there's an unfortunate position that you kind of just fall into when you're a large organization. Times change, and you have to cater to a broad audience. Like the way that D&D as a TTRPG will make the majority of its money. Well, it'll make the majority of its money from doing like its cross promotion stuff that it's doing. That's going to continue to be a thing. They're continuing to push that direction, and they will because the money doesn't live in TTRPGs, but they also need to not tick off they need to alienate as few people as possible while reaching a broader audience. And the broader you go, the less refined your vision is, because you're looking to make that funnel as large as possible so that people aren't bouncing off of it because of X, Y, and Z. And an easy way to do that is to homogenize the game, be very neutral in your approach, and it loses its own art. Where that's why indie creators can create these amazing things because they know the game that they want, and they aren't beholden to ideals of others. When you try to make money, there's a little bit of a balancing act that that is in place. Like I certainly, like I making Distal, I consider like, are people going to like this? Are they going to be able to easily understand this and kind of get on board with the idea? How do you onboard them with the idea? And fortunately, I can lean on something like Dungeons and Dragons for previous experience, just because that's kind of a gateway, and then kind of take it a different direction and say like, hey, this is what's different. And if you're good with that, then you'll probably like this game. And if you're not, it's totally fine. Go somewhere else. Like you said, like I don't envy Wizards' position, and it almost feels like there's no other way to operate, like once you get to that scale. So I don't know. Like I don't know if there's any way for them to come back and be like a different game with a more refined like approach and a smaller core like focal audience, unless they create something entirely new.
Yeah. And I don't know if they need to, because this is the thing, as I was listening to you, the thing that kept swirling in my mind is, why are TTRPGs, why was this the original thing that I was like, this is different than any other, like, why was I more attracted to this medium than video games? And one of the reasons, yes. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have guessed that like 5-10 years ago. But I would much rather play a TTRPG than any video game. And that's just based on data. But the reason is because it's way easier for a human dungeon master or game master, depending on your system, to be the artist. So to me, the rules of a TTRPG are just tools, and you can decide to use a tool in an unconventional way. You can ignore tools or add tools to your toolbox, but really, when I look at a TTRPG, that's not really the art or the entertainment. It's the dungeon master that determines what the art is going to look like through their design and through their skillful or unskillful use of the tools available to them. Which is why, again, it's like semantics. Like the tools matter, the rules matter, and they can guide you in a specific direction, especially if there is a salient core story that the designer is telling through their design. And at the end of the day, you can ignore it. So because D&D has a pretty broad tool set, it's not going to scratch the itch of really passionate, ingrained community members. And if you have someone that has a vision in mind, D&D can accomplish a lot of specific things. For example, in my latest like my D&D campaign that's been ongoing, I just have a banned spell list. I'm like, these are spells that I think would break the story we're trying to tell, so you can't take them. And that definitely changed the meta of the experience. Or facing is another one that we joke about a lot. I find facing to be a tactically interesting mechanic. A lot of tables just don't like it. They think it's too much tracking. They don't understand why you would use it. I find it personally really interesting, and I find that the stories that come out of using that mechanic versus stories that come out of not using it are a lot more interesting. So
as you were kind of talking through that, a different thought came to mind, just kind of an offshoot. When it comes to, Kendrick Lamar, just to get back to it, being a performer, I wonder what the role of TTRPGs or the games too are kind of meant to be, where it's okay for, like, so you said that, he energized the community, and like hope is important. You don't need to be a visionary in order to change things, but if you can inspire others to take further action, that's an important part of the process. So I wonder if some of the contention with, you're talking about D&D like now has, they're checking that box, is maybe that's like a missing component. Is like, okay, you've done these things to show that you're like, hey, no, we're totally, modern. Everybody is welcome. But at the same time, have you energized them to like empowered them because of the decisions that you've made? Maybe, I'm sure that varies greatly from table to table. But when it's just that, checkbox, when it's just that little extra tagline to add onto your list of bullets to send up to marketing and the executives, I don't know that's the case. Like, have you done your job for the community through the product that you've created?
I also wonder if some of that can come through the negative as well as the positive as well. So again, using Kendrick Lamar's performance as our baseline, a lot of old white people didn't like it.
Right.
Like, especially sitting in the Super Bowl room, I had lots of people turn to me and just go, I don't get it. But afterwards, scrolling through Facebook, which I don't recommend a lot of people do, it was really interesting to see a lot of people I know that initially were like, I don't get it, look it up and be like, I get it now. And they're like, actually, that's pretty cool. So even though there was this kind of like this discomfort that was revealed through just the performance being the performance, it did lead to further action. So for example, we're talking about gender representation in mythology because Wizards of the Coast did an inadequate job. So by them doing an inadequate job, how much good came out of actual conversations having it, and will we ultimately tip the scale towards something more reasonable? Or are we going to be old grognards and be like, well, Medusas have always been female, so I'm uncomfortable with a Mandusa. Like, we get to choose what that is. And I guess that's my big point, is that I just find it personally dissatisfying when the conversation ends with, we've checked the box, so we're moving on. I'd rather get my hands dirty and kind of dig into it.
Well, like I said, we were going to talk about something else, but this became something totally different. So if you found this video interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and let me know your thoughts. Your non-anti-woke thoughts in the comment section down below. You'd be surprised how often I get stuff like that I then have to delete. Suck my nuts. People who are just go bark up somebody else's tree. All right, you don't have to believe what I believe, but stop causing problems in my comment section. Anyway, thank you very much, folks. You're all signing off.